Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, one of the things that we tend to do a lot of on this channel is talk about builds. All kinds of builds for all the classes in the game. But one sentiment that I commonly see from people is trying to follow along with the build guides, but getting walled at some point or other along the process, and feeling like the build isn't doing for them what it is for us. And the main reason for that is simply the gearing process, because a lot of people tend to underestimate just how important each of the stats really are on your gear, and especially with Season 4 coming around and just changing up a massive amount of it when it comes to equipment in general, I thought now would be the perfect time to do a sort of quick refresher guide on the concept of how to make a build, specifically how to put it together on your character, the order, the best practices to use while doing so, and any tips that I'd have, and specifically this will be focused around your equipment in general, as of course the general practices of your build will be based around your skill points and Baragon points, which is entirely up to you to begin with. The start of the process then is when you first get the item, and this is an important consideration in multiple ways. If it is a specific unique that you are looking for to enable your build, consider the boss ladder target farming to get the specific one that you're after. If it is something more obscure, or honestly even some of the more common things too, you can always trade people for it. As starting in Season 4, you can trade any item that is not an uber unique and has not had any crafting done to it. We've got our own community in the Discord, linked in the video description down below if you'd like to look for people to trade with, and oftentimes people are even willing to give you the less rare stuff for very little in return. So always consider that that is an option now. That said, it works the other way too, because the other main part of the item drop itself is greater affixes now. These are a maximum roll of the original affix at 50% bonus potency on top of that as well. These can drop on any or even all of the affixes on a piece of gear, so up to 4 on a unique, because this includes everything up to literally uber uniques as well. This in itself creates a sort of tiered system to the gearing up process, because I can tell you how to get the absolute best gear, but that will only help you if you're already in position to do so. So the best way to think about this is sort of in stages. The first stage is not caring about greater affixes, focused first on getting the right spread of different stats on each piece of equipment, and that should be your first version of a build power-wise. Once you find helpful greater affixes on pieces as well, you can then replace the existing build parts and upgrade it piece by piece as necessary. That said, if you have gold, trading is again an option for things like items with rarer greater affixes. As far as getting greater affix gear, the general best activities for this from what I've seen so far seem to be the Blood Maiden event in Helltide specifically, especially with the Profane Mind Veil item activated for higher level enemies, as well as the Tormented level 200 boss versions, which drop them pretty frequently as well. The next step, once you have your base item then, is upgrading it, and the first type of upgrade method to consider is tempering before all else. The main reason for this is that tempering is the only way that you could fully permanently brick an item, which is to say that you get unlucky through the process, and then the item will just have a cap as to how good it can get as a result of that, which is lower than it could have been if that didn't happen. And so any other upgrade that you apply before tempering could be fully wasted if it happens like that. As well, tempering itself is a relatively cheap process, so you lose very little by scattershot tempering a couple of different items at the same time before committing to one of them specifically with the other upgrade methods. When it comes to good tempering practices then, always focus on rolling your most important one of the 2 affixes first. On weapons, this is usually the weapon slot temper. Generally speaking, I wouldn't let it get down to 3 rerolls before applying your second temper as well, just to see what you're looking at to begin with, and at 2 tempers or below, I wouldn't re-roll it if it is the right affix, even if it is a lower bracket roll of the right affix, because having the right stat is more important than the amount of it that you have in most cases, unless you are trying to make a 10 out of 10 perfect item before you even have a 7 out of 10 solid one. And again, I recommend doing all this in stages, so never go right for the 10 out of 10 right out of the gate. Once tempering is done then, you want to enchant your gear if necessary. If you're lucky enough, you may have already gotten the 3 stats that you wanted at perfect rolls on the item, but if you only had 2 out of 3, however, this is where enchanting comes in. In Season 4, the cost of enchanting has been capped. It varies depending on the slot, but the average piece is between 2 and 3 million, with two-handed weapons being double that, which is honestly, in most cases, a bit of a trap if you get it that high. If you ever get an item up to that 2 million price and you're still re-rolling it over and over, and it isn't at least 2 really well-rolled greater affix stats on the other 2 affixes, then you're just hemorrhaging money really, for no real proper gain. Because sometimes, even when this cap, you do have to be willing to let an item go and move on and find a new one to start with. But again, there is no hard limit to this anymore. It can't brick an item, which is why we do it after tempering. Then, after the enchanting is done, you can imprint your legendary of choice onto the item. Again, the reason simply being that if you were to temper it after applying the aspect, it could brick and waste the materials. If you were to enchant after applying the aspect, you could reach the point of just re-rolling so much that you decide it's not worth it, and again, those would be imprint materials wasted, so just save this part until afterwards. items. Then the final real step is Masterworking, which is unlocked through the Artificer's Pit activity, brand new this season. This process has 12 ranks of upgrades. Most of these increase all affixes on the piece of gear by 5%, including the tempered affixes as well. But the 4th, 8th, and 12th rank each boost one of the affixes on the piece of equipment at random by 25%, including possibly the tempered affixes. These are called major upgrades, and this is where things can get really funky even in the endgame, because you have to consider that you could get a greater affix thing like cooldown reduction, then hit all 3 of these random boosts on it through the Masterworking journey, and wind up with an insane amount of just 1 stat from a single armor piece. It's like a total 120% increase over what it was before Masterworking. But again, there are steps to this journey, and part of it is due to the resource cost. Outside of extremely rare scenarios, it is never really worth getting higher than 4 out of 12 on any one piece of gear before you reach 4 out of 12 on every one of your pieces of gear. This is simply due to the relative power gain to material cost ratio of the activity and the actual upgrades. The exceptions, of course, are items that have insanely higher value compared to the other items that you have equipped, or if you're just trying to do speed farming, you might want to focus upgrade things that give you bonus damage rather than things that give you defense, and these types of things can happen in some builds and in some playstyles. The same guideline applies to the next bracket, which is 8 out of 12 on the upgrades. As well, it's worth mentioning that while Masterworking, there is a reset button too. This costs a load of gold to do and doesn't refund the materials that you've synced into it, which does make it quite costly of a thing to choose. But this is specifically worth it if there is 1 or 2 affixes on a piece of gear that would boost your power more than the others from the major upgrade. For example, I had a bad temper on a ring that gave me distant enemy damage, but then the Masterwork hit the distant enemy damage as well, which I really didn't want, so I hit the reset button and I went again. You could argue at this point it might have been easier to just start on a fresh ring, and I think that is an entirely viable choice, but that would require having the replacement ring with at least equivalent stats to begin with. And that is what I'm talking about when I say that we upgrade our builds in stages, really. Either way, the point is you reset the Masterwork and get to 4 again, and roll the major upgrade fresh. The tip that I have for this specifically is don't be overly strict with these early on. I would prioritize hitting 4 out of 4 on your equipment over hitting a perfect 4 out of 4, so only reset if you can bring it back to 4 right afterwards. At least that's my stance on it. And it's worth noting that the best point to reset is right after the first major upgrade if it hit a bad one right out of the gate, as that way you don't waste more resources before doing the reset later anyways. With all that covered, then we have one last sort of mini section I want to talk about, which is gems, especially with the changes they've had in Season 4. For whatever reason, gem fragments are pretty slow to come by right now, which means you don't get to just craft the highest tier of every gem for every slot. So let's talk about how best to manage the way that it is right now. First things first, it is better to have 2 flawless of a gem than 1 royal and an empty slot. So always do 2 of a lower rarity over 1 of a higher rarity if you have the slots to fit them. Then we should talk the gems themselves. Generally speaking, on weapons for builds, most of them will want to do emeralds, which are 25% crit damage each. That said, sapphires give 20% vulnerable damage, and you can also get damage over time increase from this if you're a damage over time build. And these are lower numbers than the crit damage, but consider that many builds will reach much higher crit damage modifiers than vulnerable damage modifiers, for example. And because of the way that additive damage works, which these gems are, that means that the 20% vulnerable damage can actually be worth more overall than 25% critical is, depending on how your stats sit. The specific point for that depends on a number of stats that are pretty much specific to you personally, but to put it simply, if your crit damage is like 5 times as much as your vulnerable damage, you might want to switch to sapphires in your weapons. For your jewelry slots then, skulls are mostly a waste this season unless they are the exact amount you need to reach the armor cap, which is 9,230 by the way, and resistance caps are tough to reach, which makes these slots great for that purpose too. Then for armor is where things get really fun. Rubies for maximum life is general purpose good, but we now have gems that increase 1 of each main stat by 100, and it's worth noting that all of the all stats gear affixes have been removed from the game outside of uniques, which means a lot of people's Paragon boards happen to have some unactivated secondary effects on rare nodes, and these new gem effects are the perfect way to hit those breakpoints and activate them. For example, I have 1 willpower gem on my gear because it activates the doubling effect on 2 separate damage reduction from close enemies nodes, giving me a total of 9% bonus damage reduction from close just because I have that gem slotted in. And that pretty much covers it then, everyone. I hope this has helped you out, as again, I often see the sort of sentiment of people feeling like they can't do the same things that they see in build videos, despite thinking they are in similar equipment, and the main reason is that Diablo's balancing is just such a fine act that similar equipment is that much of a big difference over being in the exact same setup. So this is just a sort of general walkthrough on how to get the absolute most out of your gear and your drops, and get yourself into your own perfect build, at least the best that you can muster out of your own stuff, as quickly and effectively as possible. possible. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.